Okay, geometry students, in this video we will be starting chapter 4, and this chapter is about different types of triangles, classifying triangles using the Pythagorean theorem, medians of triangles, and triangle inequalities. A lot of this right now doesn't make a lot of sense, I understand that, but it will as we continue going through chapter 4, okay? Today we're going to be looking at a definition of triangles, which of course sounds a little dumb. I know we all know what a triangle is, but we're going to write down the definition of a triangle, and also we're going to look today at how to classify triangles into two different categories. Okay, so it's pretty easy stuff, and hopefully you guys will understand this material pretty well. All right, go ahead and copy your heading down for today if you would, please. Classifying triangles is your heading. Classifying triangles is your heading. Lesson 4.1, and be sure and include today's date, please. Everyone should be taking notes. Okay, please take notes. Classifying triangles, lesson 4.1, and be sure and include today's date. Okay, everyone should be writing this down. Thank you. All right, let's continue on. Now, let's start off with the definition of a triangle. Okay, you will be responsible for this on tests and quizzes, so copy this down and learn. This is a real simple definition, and I do want you to know this. Okay, here it is. I'll wait a second while you copy this in your notes. A triangle is a figure formed by three segments, and of course these three segments are joining three non-collinear points. Okay, a figure formed by three segments joining three non-collinear points. That makes sense. Here's a point, here's a point, here's a point. None of those 3 points are collinear. In other words, all three of those points do not line up in a straight line, and then we connect them with three segments and we get a triangle. Okay, all right, so a figure formed by three segments joining three non-collinear points. All right, you are responsible for this definition. Make sure you know this. Okay, moving on. Now, that's a pretty simple definition, and really it is just common sense. Okay, now for the rest of this video, we will be classifying triangles by their sides and by their angles. Okay, so here we go. Let's start off by first of all looking at different triangles based on their sides. Okay, so for the rest of the video, we're going to be classifying triangles by their sides and by their angles. We're going to start off first of all with classifying triangles based on their sides. Okay, so here we go. There are three basic types of triangles that are based on their sides. And I'm not going to make you memorize any of these definitions, okay? And that's the good news, okay? I'm sure you're glad about that. But you still have to know what each one means. Let me explain the difference, okay? I'm not going to ask you to fill in the blank or to quote any of these definitions that I'm about ready to give you. However, you do have to be completely familiar with them and be able to match them with the correct triangle, okay? Let me show you what I mean. Copy this down, please. The first triangle we're going to look at today is called an equilateral triangle, okay? An equilateral triangle. Now write that down, please. I'm going to wait a second while you copy that down. An equilateral triangle. Now, an equilateral triangle is a triangle that has all three sides congruent. So go ahead and draw a triangle if you would, please. That has three congruent sides. In other words, all three sides have the same length, okay? Then go ahead and make note of that by putting a mark here, a mark here, and a mark here. That's so easy, students, okay? So in other words, on a test or a quiz, I'm not going to ask you to write out the words, an equilateral triangle is a triangle with three congruent sides, okay? I'm not going to do that. However, I will expect you to know what an equilateral triangle is and be able to match it up to a proper triangle and to understand what it means, okay? It's very important you understand that, okay? All right, equilateral triangle. Make sure you have this copied down in your notes. Now the next triangle we're going to look at is called an isosceles triangle, okay? Now this one's a little trickier, so be careful, okay? I'm going to grab this triangle from over here and pull this over here to show you guys something you need to see. Okay, now write down the words in your notes if you would, please. isosceles triangle, okay? Isosceles triangle. ISOSCELES. Isosceles triangle. Now, an isosceles triangle has at least two congruent sides, at least two. So draw a triangle like this, okay? And we're gonna mark this side here congruent with this side over here. Okay, there we go. Now this is an isosceles triangle because an isosceles triangle has at least two congruent sides. But here's the catch. Guys, look at this. An equilateral triangle also has at least two congruent sides. It has three. So please listen to this carefully. This triangle right here is an equilateral triangle. But this triangle here is also an isosceles triangle because an isosceles triangle must have at least two congruent sides. It can have three, that's fine, but it must have at least two. So this triangle here is not an equilateral triangle. It is not. However, it is an isosceles triangle. This triangle here is also an isosceles triangle, and it's also an equilateral triangle, both. So let that sink in for a second. Let me get a drink here. Let that sink in for a second. Okay, students, take some really good notes on this. All right. An equilateral triangle must have three congruent sides. Okay. An isosceles triangle has to have at least two congruent sides, but it can actually have more. Okay, that's totally okay. So equilateral, isosceles. Okay. Now the last triangle we're going to look at today, when it comes to classifying triangles by their sides, is a scalene triangle. Okay, scalene triangle. Now a scalene triangle has no congruent sides. None. Okay? So it could look like this, dude. Let's go ahead and draw a triangle like this. There would be a scalene triangle. Okay? I would put a mark here, 2 marks here, and 3 marks here. None of those sides are congruent. Okay? So let's quickly review here. Okay? An equilateral triangle has to have 3 congruent sides. All 3 sides have to be congruent, okay? An isosceles triangle has to have at least two congruent sides. So it could also have 3 congruent sides, okay? And then a scalene triangle has no congruent sides at all. All right. Now again, students, I'm not going to ask you to quote these definitions, okay? But you need to be familiar with what these triangles look like and which category they fall into, okay? All right, moving on. Now, on on your own, go ahead and copy these 3 triangles down, and I want you to label them, okay? Now one of these, either this one, or this one will have more than one name, okay? So I want everyone to do this, okay? No one in class should be just sitting there, okay? Everyone should be working. So go ahead and copy this triangle down. Go ahead and copy this triangle down and this triangle down, and go ahead and label these with the correct names, okay? I'm going to pause a minute. Let's start with this one here, okay? I'm going to put the answers up in just a second. Let's go ahead and try this triangle here. If you work ahead, that's totally fine. You can do that if you want to. Okay, here we go. And hopefully the supervising teacher should be making sure everyone is taking notes. Okay, everyone in class should be taking notes. All right, so here we go. This triangle here is called an equilateral triangle. Okay. Equilateral triangle, okay? However, it is also called an isosceles triangle. Because remember, students, an isosceles triangle must have at least two congruent sides, and we have at least two congruent sides. An equilateral triangle must have all three sides congruent, and we have all three sides congruent, okay? This triangle over here, I'll give you just a minute to do this one. Go ahead and take a minute and give me the name of this triangle here. Okay, you should have put this for your answer. Scalene. Because not one side here is congruent. All three sides are not. All three sides are different lengths, okay? And then this one over here, students, you should have put isosceles because it definitely cannot be scalene because we have two congruent sides here and here. And it can't be equilateral because equilateral has to have all three sides congruent. So it has to be isosceles because we have to have at least two congruent sides, and we have at least two congruent sides. So this triangle here is an isosceles triangle, okay? I hope this is making sense. I don't want to do an overkill and bore you guys. However, I would rather do that than to confuse someone or not have you understand the math. Okay, so we're going to do one more problem like this, then we'll move on to the classifying triangles by their angles. Okay, students, so here we go. My voice is pretty rough today, so I do apologize. Here we go. Go ahead and copy this problem in your notes, please. Everyone should be taking notes, so please copy this problem in your notes. And when you're done copying it down, go ahead and classify this triangle as either equilateral or isosceles or scalene, okay? I'll give you just a minute to do that. We should be pretty comfortable with this by now. So go ahead and quickly draw this triangle, label it 8, 8, and 9, and then give me the name of this triangle based on its sides, okay? Okay, here we go. Notice we have a side here with a length of 8, a side here with a length of 8, so we have two sides that are congruent, and we call that an isosceles triangle. Hopefully you understand that, okay? All right, let's continue on. I want you to try another problem here. Okay, go ahead and copy this in your notes if you would, please. Go ahead and copy this. Triangle with length of 2, 2, 2, and then give me the name or names of this triangle, okay? And I'll tell you now, there will be two triangles. There will be two triangles, okay? I mean, two names to this triangle, sorry. There will be two names to this triangle. All right, quickly do that. Go ahead and copy this triangle down. 2, 2, and 2, and then give me two names. Okay, we definitely call this triangle. Okay, guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. It's called an equilateral triangle. One of my boys is being a little too loud there, so I had to deal with that. Okay, equilateral triangle. Okay, but it's also called an isosceles triangle. Remember, an isosceles triangle does not have to have exactly two sides congruent. It has to have at least two sides congruent. It can also have three sides congruent, okay? So this triangle here is an equilateral triangle, and it's also an isosceles triangle. It's both, okay? All right, moving on to our last one here. Go ahead and copy this down, please, if you would. A triangle with a length of 10, 6, and 7, okay? A triangle with a length of 10, 6, and 7. And then go ahead and give it a name. And I'm going to speed this up a little bit. Obviously, it's scalene because the scalene triangle has no congruent sides, okay? All right, moving on. Now, students, obviously, did you notice that all the classifications that we just learned were based on the sides? Okay, hopefully you noticed that, okay? Well, look, now let's look at different types of triangles based on their angles, okay? there will be 4 different types. Okay, 4 different types. So here we go. Copy this in your notes if you would, please. Equiangular triangle. Equiangular triangle. Copy this in your notes. And I'm going to give you a picture of this, okay? Here it is. Take really good notes, students, please, okay? Equiangular triangle. An equiangular triangle has 3 congruent angles. Write that down, please. 3 congruent angles. There it is. So you need to know that. I'm not going to ask you to quote the definition. I'm not going to ask you to fill in the blanks or anything like that, but you need to know that equiangular triangle has 3 congruent angles, and it will look like this here. Okay? All right, let's continue on. You also need to know that what an acute triangle is, okay? An acute triangle. Well, here's an acute triangle. Okay, write this down. Draw a picture like that. And then make note of this. All 3 angles have to be acute. Now, hopefully you remember what acute is. Acute is an angle that's less than 90 degrees. Okay? So in this triangle here, let's go ahead and put some numbers in here. Let's say this is 50 degrees. And let's say this is 40 degrees. No, let's not say that. Let's say that's 60 degrees. We're going to say this would be 70 degrees here. Okay? Notice that all 3 angles are different, or notice all 3 angles are less than 90. So because all 3 angles are less than 90, then we call this an acute triangle, okay? So an equiangular triangle is when you have 3 congruent angles. And acute triangle is when you have 3 acute angles, okay? That's called an acute triangle, all right? Okay, moving on to our next type, obtuse triangle. Now take some really good notes on this, please, students, okay? Draw a triangle that looks something like that, okay? And then make note of this. One angle is obtuse. Please make note of that, students. One angle is obtuse. Now, obtuse means larger than 90 degrees. So make note of that, okay? So we're going to go ahead and call this angle right here 120 degrees. If you want to write that in your notes, 120. So notice one of my angles is greater than 90, so we call that an obtuse triangle. So let's review again. An equiangular triangle. Equiangular has 3 congruent angles. An acute triangle has 3 acute angles. An obtuse triangle has 1 obtuse angle. Then lastly, a right triangle has 1 right angle. Of course, a right angle is 90 degrees. Okay, so in your notes, and out of all 4 of these, this is probably the most common one you guys are very familiar with, the right triangle, okay? There's a right triangle. Here's my right angle symbol right here. There we go. So this is 90 degrees. So this is a right triangle, okay? Because I have 1 90-degree angle. Okay, so very quickly, I don't want to bore you, but I don't want to lose you. Equiangular, 3 congruent angles. Acute, 3 acute angles. Obtuse, 1 obtuse angle. And then a right triangle is 1 right angle, okay? All right, moving on. Let's go ahead and apply this to a couple problems here very quickly. Okay, now I am going to go a little faster, so you'll probably have to pause the video a little bit, but here we go. Let's classify these triangles here by their sides and their angles both. Do you see that? We're going to classify these triangles by their sides and by their angles. Okay, so here we go. First of all, let's start with their sides. I have two congruent sides. This side here is congruent to this side here, so I know that's called an isosceles triangle. Okay, try to keep up with me here. Okay, guys, take some really good notes. All right. Now, next, I notice I have, let's see, I don't have three congruent angles. I don't have a right angle. I don't have an obtuse angle, but I do have three angles that are all acute angles. 40, 70, and 70 are all less than 90. So I have an acute triangle. Okay, so there we go. I classified this triangle by its sides and by its angles. Okay, all right, continuing on. Let's take a look at this triangle here. Go ahead and copy this in your notes, students, if you would, please. Copy this down. Triangle 3, 4, and 5 with the right angle, okay? Okay, students, go ahead and copy this down in your notes, please. I'll give you just a second to do that. And you may work ahead or you may wait for me. It's up to you, okay? We're going to, first of all, label this triangle by its sides, okay? Everyone should be taking notes, okay? Everyone write this down, please. Okay, I have three sides, and all three sides are different measurements, okay? So we call that a scalene triangle, okay? Now, notice I have one right angle here, so we call that a right triangle, okay? So I just classified this triangle by its sides, and I classified it by its angles. We call this triangle a scalene right triangle, okay? All right, last one. Go ahead and copy this in your notes if you would, please. And then you may work. Okay, students, go ahead and copy this down, please. Triangle with 40, 95, and 45 degree angles, and then sides of 6.4, 9, and 5.8. Okay. Go ahead and copy that down, and then go ahead and classify this triangle by its angles and by its sides, okay? Okay, here we go. Let's start with the sides, okay? We have a side of 6.4, a side of 9, and a side of 5.8. Notice all three sides are different lengths, so we call that a scalene triangle, okay? Scalene. Now, notice I have no congruent angles. They're all different angles, okay? 40, 95, and 45, okay? But notice one of them is larger than 90. 95 is larger than 90. So we have one obtuse angle, thus we have an obtuse triangle. Okay, so we call this a scalene obtuse triangle. Okay, so what we did here is we classified these by their size and by their angles, okay? Let's go ahead and do one more, and then I'll be done with the video, okay? One more. Here it is, okay? I want you to label this based on its angles and its sides, okay? Go ahead and copy this down. A triangle with a mark here and a mark here, and angles of 72, 72, and 36, okay? Copy that in your notes, please, and then go ahead and label it, classify it based on its sides and also based on its angles, okay? Okay, here we go, students. Based on its sides, we would call this triangle an isosceles triangle, okay? Because we have two congruent sides, this side here and this side here, okay? Based on the angles, I would not call it equiangular because I do not have three congruent angles, okay? I would not call it a right triangle because I have no right angle. I would not call it an obtuse triangle because I have no obtuse angle. In fact, all three of my angles are acute, so I would call this an acute triangle. So we call this isosceles acute triangle, okay? An isosceles acute triangle. Students, it is your job to know what an equiangular triangle is, an acute triangle, an obtuse triangle, and a right triangle. It's your job to know. It is also your job to know what an equilateral triangle is, an isosceles triangle, and a scalene triangle, okay? So please learn this, understand it, and make sure you work hard on your homework, okay? If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call or email.